this is Dr. Jeffrey Dyer. This is a presentation I gave in 2013 on the subject of boundaries. Boundaries are simply knowing what belongs to you and what belongs to someone else. A misunderstanding of boundaries is a major cause of conflicts with self, family, friends, work, children, extended family, your spouse, and ultimately with God. I can't begin to explain how important understanding the subject of boundaries is and how much we need to be aware of them in our lives. Thank you for listening, and if you have questions or comments, please contact me at jeffreydyer.com. God's blessings be with you. Now to the live presentation. I guess if I were to be asked, what is a central psychological truth that also, I believe, is quite biblical, it has to do with the area of boundaries. More people have trouble because of boundaries than almost anything else that I have dealt with in my 30 years of ministry. Boundaries are a real topic. It's simply knowing what belongs to you and understanding what belongs to someone else. Cal Thomas, a syndicated columnist, has written, "Boundaries define everything, from football fields, nations, states, yet our culture has pretended it would violate boundaries in human relationships without serious consequences." I just can't emphasize enough how important boundaries are. And I'm going to give an example. A woman came to my office, very distraught. She was a lady who was 53 years old, and she had had a terrible fight with her daughter-in-law. Nothing surprising about that. And the terrible fight was that the daughter-in-law had told her mother-in-law that she wasn't allowed to come over and see the kids and spend any time with them. She had had it. She said, "I warned you, I told you, and you have violated again and again the rules that I have set for my children, and you're not welcome here anymore." And so at first, as I was listening, I thought, well, I don't want to say that, but what a mean lady. But then this 53-year-old woman began to expand the story. And here's what would happen. The daughter-in-law would change a diaper. And the 53-year-old mother-in-law would say, no, you don't do it that way. You do it this way. You shouldn't let your daughter eat this. She should be eating that. You should say no to this. You should say yes to that. Well, if that were my son, I wouldn't allow this and allow that. Do you see what's happening? Boundaries are being violated again and again. And there was no negotiating with this 53-year-old lady because she's right about everything. And she's just trying to do what's best for her grandkids. What's wrong with that? So the daughter-in-law, of course, goes to her husband. The husband tries to tell his mother to keep out, but his mom can't help herself. She has to get involved and tell the daughter-in-law she's wrong. And in listening, I even think that some of the stuff the mother-in-law said was correct, in my view. But the point is, if you give most sons a choice between their wife or their mother, guess which one wins? Their wife. And so this wife, well, I'm not agreeing with what she did. I don't even know if she's a Christian or not. She had had it with the mother-in-law because the mother-in-law violated boundaries. She crossed over into that which does not belong to her. What happens is that when you are an in-law, you could easily become an outlaw. And to avoid that problem, what you have to do is you have to parent through the children's parents, not around them, and not in conflict with them. Otherwise, you are in boundary violation. What I'd like you to do for just a minute is to think in your own life, and it doesn't have to be you, it can be somebody you know, where you have a question about a boundary being violated, or where you see a clear-cut violation of boundaries. In other words, again, a boundary is simply knowing what belongs to you and what belongs to somebody else. Can you think of any examples?
For me, I can somewhat relate to the earlier topics discussed. Bring this up to throw out a curveball. Growing up, I had a very narcissistic mother with lots of boundaries, always. Being grown up in there. And a father that was very in deep with his faith for a long while now, he's been steered the other way. So that's not a specific topic. It's about being broken there. Along the lines of what he was talking about, even with parenting. And parents and the way has to deal with that. It's very difficult.
Very messy, isn't it?
It is.
A narcissistic person is always right. And their personality, it thrives on the need to be right. Not just being right, a need to be right. And so if my spouse happens to be religious or shows interest in the Christian faith, that means that I'm not okay because I'm not interested. Therefore, I need to cross the boundary into his life and pull him out of that. Otherwise, I won't be affirmed and feel okay. And so as a son, for example, in that issue, you get torn because you love both your mom and dad. So what do? You're a person, I assume, of faith, or you wouldn't be here. You see your dad pulled out of that, and now that creates in you some anger towards mom. And some anger towards dad for being a wimp and not standing up for what he believes. But you see, if he stood up for what he believes, the narcissist is not going to be able to handle that, and it's going to be constant power clashes and problems. So it's a real mess. A real mess in boundaries in that example. All right? I've got so much here that we're gonna talk about. I want to mention a professor of mine that I had at Fuller Theological Seminary. And I really appreciated my years there very much. I'm convinced that Fuller is the best theological seminary in the country, or one of the best. And it continues to be the largest and most vibrant in church growth and other things. And I had a professor at Fuller in psychology, and I won't mention his name, but there were 9 people in the class. And whenever I would raise my hand to give an answer, he would never call on me. So, it happened a few times, and I thought, well, okay. And I raised my hand again. Doesn't call on me. Finally, one day, I was so... He called on me, and you know what his response was? And then just moved on. I couldn't figure it out. Why didn't this guy like me? What was it about me that he didn't seem to respond to very well? And then he was the final kicker. One day, we were in a seminary, they call it a refectory. It's just a seminary name for cafeteria. And one of the things he always did was he would see students from the class, and he'd sit down and have a cup of coffee or whatever with them, whatever group. But one afternoon came the test. I was sitting alone at a table, and there were no other students in the refectory. He got his coffee, and I thought, well, here he's going to go. He's going to sit down next to me, right? He sat absolutely at the other corner as far away as he possibly could be. I didn't get it. I just did not understand why he was treating me in that way. And so, I thought I would do something that we'll talk about maybe later today or another presentation. I do what's known as care fronting. I never confront. I care front. I care about you and I want things to be right between us. And so I want to straighten it out. So I decided I was going to care front this professor. And another day, I saw him sitting in his office and I knocked on the door. And I said, can I come in? And he said, sure. And I said, you know, I've been in this class with you in advanced psychometrics, and there have been some really weird things happening between you and me. You don't seem to ever call on me. In the cafeteria, you didn't sit with me. And you just don't show any interest in me as a student. And he said, well, forgive me, but what's your name? And I said, well, my name is Jeff Dyer. He goes, yes, I remember reading one of your papers. Well, you know, Jeff, I think it's really good that you're here because you're going to learn a lesson today. And I said, what's that? He said, I've never thought about you. I've never realized that I wasn't calling on you in class. I never was aware of you in this time that you identified in the refectory that I didn't sit down. I've never given you a single thought, any more than I have any other students. And so all this negative stuff that you're feeling belongs to you. And it's really good that you're checking it out with me. It really is. Because I want you to know that you and I are in a good place, a clear place. There's no problem between us. And so, what I was doing was projecting. Onto that professor. I was projecting my feelings onto him, every one of which was incorrect. He went on to say, I, speaking of himself, am an introverted personality. I'm not the friendliest guy in the world. I'm not the most outgoing. I'm not the most gregarious. I suspect you're someone that's more of an extrovert than I am. And so maybe you've learned something about introverted personalities. And that is, you don't want to project onto them what belongs to you. You see what I did? I violated a boundary. I made all sorts of assumptions about a man who never had really given me a second thought. And I wonder how many times you do that. Project onto others their feelings, their thoughts, their impressions. And you have really no evidence for that projection. You've not checked it out with the person. You just feel this way.